All right, we left off talking about the different blood types, and we said there's type A, type B, type AB, which has both of the name tags or labels or antigens on them, and then type O that has no labels or antigens on them. And we said that there's an inverse relationship to what is floating around in the majority of the plasma, which are your antibodies, and antibodies are going to be searching for and clumping and destroying anything that doesn't look like the cell types that you have. So if you are type A, your antibodies are going after Bs. If you are type B, your antibodies are going after As. And if you're type AB, you can't have any antibodies because that would mean you'd attack yourself. And if you're type O, you have all the different antibody types because you have no labels. So labels are weird to your cells. And so you're going to attack any kind of cells that have any kind of labels. We said that because of that, your type AB blood typically is seen as a universal recipient because you have no security guards. You can receive any kind of blood. But type O, because you have no antigens, because you have no labels, you're perfect to create blood as a donor for everybody else. You're a universal donor. But you can only receive blood from type O individuals because you have a security team that recognizes everything. So you're very, very sensitive in terms of being a recipient yourself. So we alluded to that's not the whole story. There's actually some other parts that help us to type blood, and it goes further even than this. But your blood type, you might have heard of AB positive or O negative or A positive, right? The positive and negative is talking about a third antigen type. So far we've talked about two. We've talked about A type antigens, B type antigens, and remember, there's not a third type yet because O doesn't have an antigen. And the only other type of cell is like combining the two antigens that we have, right? So there's a third antigen, and it's called the D antigen. And it was discovered in rhesus monkeys. And that's why this D antigen is also sometimes known as the Rh factor. So think of it as a third antigen type. There's an A, there's a B, and there's an Rh. So now we have three different name tags that we can stick onto red blood cells. You could have one, two, or three of those name tags, a first, second, and a third name, or you could have no names, or you could have a combination of. And this is what it looks like. That rhesus factor has some abbreviations that sometimes throw off people. If you have this third label, if you have the Rh name tag or antigen, or the D antigen, as some people call it, then we just give you the designation as positive. You're Rh positive. And to be even briefer, we just say positive. So this individual who's O positive, they have no labels, remember, because O is labelless, except they have this third one. They have the D antigen, so we're going to put a positive instead of adding in a whole other letter set. See, because they found the rhesus factor well after we had really gotten going using the ABO blood type system. So we had already started using like ABO, AB to name people's blood types. And it's been documented in medical records. So when they found out this new blood type, they didn't want to go back and like change all of the records to be ARH or AD or ABD. Like, and it gets long, right? So they just decided because you either have this factor or you don't, we'll just put a positive there if it's there, and we'll put a negative there if we know it exists in human biology, but you personally don't have it. Okay, so Rh negative is the negative sign just basically means you don't have that label. So for example, this A positive blood, it would be someone who has the A labels and they have a second label for Rh. If you have a negative blood, then you have the A label, you have the A antigens, And that's it. You don't have any other. You don't have a label for negative. Like it's just, you just don't have it. It's like names, right? If you're A positive, it's kind of like you're like Carrie Pilgrim is my name. But if you were A negative, then you're kind of like Cher or Madonna or Beyonce. Like you're just one name. You're just A. Okay. And then the negative means like you just don't even need a second name because you don't have it. Now, why is the Rh significant? Well, they found out that it's particularly important in pregnancy. So, when a fetus is Rh positive and the parent is Rh negative, there can be a miscommunication between the immune systems of both parties. And the parental immune system can actually attack and kill off the fetus. So, it's really important to do blood tests early in pregnancy, especially if a parent feels like they have had a prior pregnancy, even especially if it has not gone to term, there was a miscarriage or an abortion before the third trimester. We want to double check that the Rh factors are not interfering with one another. Because if they are, we want to take immunosuppressant drugs to keep our parents' immune system from attacking the infant. And this infant attack is called erythroblastosis fetalis. That's something you should have in your notes. It is one of your pathologies. And so, how it works is like this. It actually takes two pregnancies to show up as a risk factor for the developing fetus. And so imagine that you have a Rh negative parent and an Rh positive parent, and that these two individuals conceive a child who is Rh positive. That whole first pregnancy is going to go totally fine. That parent is going to deliver the child. And when we do, there's going to be some broken blood vessels, there's going to be some um, breaking and ripping of the placenta. So you can imagine during the childbirth process and labor, there's going to be some mixing and exposure of the infant's blood and the parent's blood at the same time, at that time of childbirth. But it's not a risk for the fetus because they are being delivered at this time. So they're being removed from, the parent's blood. And there's no antibodies, as you can see, because this parent has never been exposed to Rh positive blood before. So they don't have that antibody in their plasma yet. But after birth, that exposure to that Rh positive child allows that parent to, over time, build a plasma concentration of Rh, anti Rh antibodies. And so now, if this individual is to ever get pregnant again and have an Rh positive child, their blood is already primed to attack that foreign Rh antigen, which means they will attack that child, even though it was conceived inside of them, right? And so, somewhere around the second to third trimester, when the cardiovascular system is starting to form, we end up having miscarriages and problems for both paternal and fetal health and development because of this immune reaction. And so we have to, very early on, intervene with immunosuppressants. Now, you might be asking, like, well, how come this doesn't happen if you have, say, like a type A mom and a type B parent who has a type B child? How come this doesn't happen with ABO antibodies? And the factor is that these Rh antibodies, for whatever reason, their shape is such that it can make it through the placenta. all the other antibodies against all the other blood types can't make it through the placenta. They just can't. And so you can have a child with a very different blood type than your own with no problems. It's just that Rh factor that has to match, or we have to immunosuppress if it's a second or third pregnancy or more, right? Okay, so that is our Rh factor and a review of blood types.